Hey there, real fast, I just wanted to give you some background on Padraig Mac Piarais, the poet who wrote the poem The Rebel, which we'll be discussing in class. Now, the goal of this is just to give you some background, contextual understanding of Piarais, where he was coming from and kind of his mindset. If you understand this, how he was raised, you're going to be able to understand a lot more about his poem, the way he wrote his poems, and really kind of the context of what's going on. So here we go. First and foremost, we're going to see a picture of Piarais on the left side of the screen. Young man right through here, going to live from November 10th, 1879 until his execution on May 3rd, 1916. We'll talk a little bit about his execution in just a second. Now, it's important to understand that he was impacted heavily by the idea of colonization. Now, he is Irish. Ireland, of course, if you understand a little bit of the history at this time, was controlled by the British for about 800 years. It was the first part of the British Empire that they expanded out of Great Britain, was into Ireland. Eventually, as you know, controlled pretty much most of the world, or a large portion of the world. So he is going to be impacted heavily by this. His father was actually English. His mother was Irish. Just kind of some interesting connection right through there. But the idea of colonization, the idea of being a colonized person under the control of a foreign government, at least that's how he's seeing it, is going to really influence a lot of his life. He's going to found an organization known as the Gaelic League. Now, the Gaelic League, he was a co-founder of this, focuses on bringing back the native Irish language into society in Ireland, getting rid of English, which was viewed as the language of the colonizer, and replacing it with the traditional language. He's also going to be a teacher, which is important to understand. He really viewed education as something that was important. He saw this as a way of particularly preserving the culture of Ireland. He founded schools that were in the traditional Irish language. And that's going to be, again, important in understanding who he was. Now, the context of this poem and the greater context of what's going on, first and foremost, is you need to understand the idea of the rebellion of 1798. This was a large uprising in Ireland against the British, trying to remove British control from Ireland. It was not successful. However, it is very impactful in the idea of Irish nationalist culture. It is something that Piarais would have certainly looked back on and viewed favorably when he was coming to power, politically speaking, and when he was writing this poem. Second is the idea of the Great Famine of the 1840s. Now, Piarais was born after this time period. However, it would have been in the living memory of those who would have survived the famine. At this time, the population of Ireland goes from about 8 million down to about 6 million. So about 2 million people ended up actually leaving the country, either because of immigration or because of dying. So it's important to understand this right here. A lot of people in Ireland blamed this on the British and some of the policies of the British in terms of selling food. It wasn't that there was no food in Ireland. There was food in Ireland. However, in order to make a living, they had to sell that food. We can discuss that idea a little bit more in class, but the important thing to understand here is this was in living memory of people who were around when Piarais was growing up in his formative years, and there's a lot of blame placed on the British for this. Lastly is the idea of Irish home rule. This is a belief that Ireland would stay a part of the United Kingdom, but be able to kind of govern and control themselves. This was happening in the late 1880s and 1890s, and then coming up again into right before World War I started. Again, this idea of Irish home rule was happening. Piarais would have initially been a supporter of this and ultimately kind of decided that, nope, we want more than home rule. And the last thing to understand about Piarais when we're talking about him and what's going on here is the idea of World War I. Now, Ireland is controlled by the British, so Irish people would be fighting alongside the British. A number of them would be in World War I. A number of people, including Piarais, believed that the Irish should not be fighting in World War I because doing that would be fighting for the colonizer. Why fight for these people who are not your country? Why risk your life and die for someone who's not a part of your country? Something Piarais is going to think, have this idea. So when you hear the idea of the poem, The Rebel, this is kind of the background, the context I want you to have. We'll go into a little bit more detail and review this in class to help make it a little bit more easy to understand. But this should give you some background knowledge and information. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. I will see you later. We'll discuss this poem. Good luck.